I was going to start off by saying that most social entrepreneurs, or people who call themselves social entrepreneurs, have had one fucked moment. As anyone who's worked with communities would know, is there tends to be some kind of dramatic moment when they've kind of, if not snapped, at least have seen something. And I guess my fucked moment was in 2000 when I'd been made documentary films for Channel 4 and the BBC for, oh God, almost 20 years. In 2000, I was making a documentary film for Channel 4 and CNN in Liberia and West Africa. And for various reasons, we ended up arrested and put in prison for quite a long time. And we got out. And I was in this, my thumb is strong enough, this kind of marvelous place, which I found actually on the internet. But the real point, rather than a deep issue of sorrow, was that I was looked after by an amazing number of people when I was inside the prison. And in films which I've made for Channel 4 and the BBC, I've found in most people a kind of sense where they've needed some support, or there's a sort of a kind of emptiness, a kind of, sort of loneliness, which has kind of they've needed to kind of deal with. And I find that kind of entrepreneurs who I meet, all of them tend to have some sort of driving passion which comes from a need. And in the projects I'm going to talk to you a bit about later is that there's a kind of will to associate and a will to sort of try and connect people and find ways in which people can connect together. So this is a film I made for Channel 4 a few years ago about a bloke who was trying to give up sadomasochism. He'd been doing sadomasochism for many, many, many years. And I followed him for a year and a half, trying to kind of give it up and failing to give it up. And he was essentially kind of quite a sort of lonely character who needed to find some sort of absolution and wanted to kind of socialize. He needed to socialize. He was an individual, like lots of individuals who need to socialize, need to become kind of less isolated. I made a film last year for Channel 4 about the King's Speech, the feature film. And there was a kind of fantastic story, as you know, if you've seen the film, of a kind of man, the king, couldn't talk, needed to find some way in which he could find language, and he found it through the help of, from the help of his therapist, Lionel Logue. And then I made a film also last year about Wallis Simpson, the 30s socialite, and how actually she found herself kind of in a marriage which she didn't really want. We found some letters of hers which kind of were very, very sad and rather tragic, but whereby she had sort of wished for something, and then somehow she'd found herself kind of marrying this sort of ghastly kind of man, almost a kind of child, and trying to sort of find a way in which she could kind of come out of her kind of isolation. This is all rather philosophical and pseudo-religious as well. And so she would talk about kind of in her letters about how she was lonely and wanted to find a way in which she could kind of get out of this sort of, well, a marriage full of love, but also a marriage which she kind of never really quite sort of wanted, or she had it and then she found herself trapped. So behind what I do is about sort of trying to deal with that and trying to encourage people to kind of associate and find ways to associate. Because I think we obviously need to find ways to associate, and there's tons of ways offline in the digital world which exist for us to associate, but also there is a kind of will and a need to kind of socialize. And in many ways, we're trying to kind of find different ways in which we can kind of recover that. And part of what I do as a social entrepreneur is trying to find ways and means by which people can recover that. In what I do is also what I tend to try and do is find media through which people can kind of engage, and inevitably it ends up with some kind of sort of reciprocity whereby people give something for something else in return. And I guess I'm always trying to find that sort of little delicious sort of sweet spot in the middle there, which is where basically everybody's always kind of really grim about kind of need, and then everyone's kind of always kind of like want. And the real challenge is to try and find that sort of sweet spot, which is kind of way more than all of that. If you haven't been to the People's Supermarket in Camden, come see us. We're around the corner from Great Ormond Street. I'm one of 3 founders. There's myself, there was a chef called Arthur Potts Dawson and someone called Kate, who's now chief exec. I'm on the board. We set up the People's Supermarket. We opened in May 2010. We're just a supermarket, no brain surgery there. We're just a corner shop. But the thing which is different is that we're basically a cooperative and we're a members cooperative. So the deal basically is you pay an annual subscription, you give 4 hours of your time a month, and in return you get a discount on the cost of your shopping. So it feels like a shop, it looks like a shop, it is a shop, it ain't brain surgery, but it's just got underneath the bonnet has got a different way in which people can kind of engage with with shopping. And what happens is that the slave labor, I shouldn't have said that, the free labor of members allows us to do things, for instance, to discount the price and to slightly fuck with the sort of supply chain in terms of kind of manipulating the price. So you can end up basically you end up with a loaf of bread which is cheaper than Tesco. And also in terms of trying to create a social experience in the store, we've got a kitchen which is done remarkably well, where basically we've got chefs. We now, since we opened in May 2010, we employ about 25 people. Is that basically we employ chefs to take food which is just almost kind of gone, and we turn it into takeaway kind of lunches. And we have parties in the store, we have evenings in the store, and basically so that it feels like it's kind of more of a community rather than just a kind of shop. And we have members, we've got 1,000 members. Each person has got their own kind of attitude, their own thing, their own shtick, their own kind of anxiety, their own kind of thing, which they feel very strongly about. But we're accountable to the membership and they vote on everything. And I guess the point is that in terms of creating this enterprise, the kind of drive has been about trying to encourage ways and means by which it sounds dead corny about how people can be who they would like to be, how people can be happy, and how people through work and through kind of sharing what they're good at can find a way in which they can create an economy, which is a new economy. And I kind of do this kind of almost kind of serially and almost kind of addictively. So at the moment, for instance, I'm working on a housing estate in Sheffield. I've been working there for quite a long time, where basically people sort of tend to say normally that they're shit at everything and they don't know everything. But then if you walk down the street, kind of on most days at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a sort of bloke who's turning a kind of van into a sort of Formula One racing car. So we're running a project with support from Nesta and various other places where, in effect, we're just asking people initially kind of what they're good at. And then through that process of asking people what they're good at, we're coming up with plans now to sort of turn these sort of slightly kind of dead, kind of irritating, kind of characterless kind of neighborhood centers and a place which calls itself the hub but ain't much of a hub, into something which is the basis for kind of two new social enterprises. One around food and food production, taking home cooking into an estate's kind of delivery service, and the other into a kind of fix-it, kind of repair kind of thing. There are other initiatives I've worked on. For instance, this is a project to do with the regeneration or renewal of Castleford, a town in West Yorkshire, where we ended up as a process of involving kind of people massively at Bridge, and also a kind of slightly sort of Scandi, stripped back kind of minimalist town square, a kind of new town square, a new square there on estate and the housing and playgrounds. And then another initiative which was basically I started it in 2007, where in Middlesbrough in the northeast of England, where there was a process basically by which kind of people kind of grew food all over the town. It's now gone on for 4 years and it's kind of got lots of external cash into it now, where kind of about 1,000 people kind of grew food in places that they wanted to grow food, in weird places. And people then learnt how to cook with the food which they grew. And then there was a big sort of town meal, which my thing was basically is that why do sort of town meals only happen in Italian hilltop villages in feature films? They can happen in Middlesbrough. And there was a kind of awesome event, this was back in 2007, it's gone on now, repeated itself for 4 years, where thousands of people came together and had a kind of big communal meal. I think my motivation is not about necessarily, well, it's not really about peace, love, and everybody loving one another. I'm far too cynical and kind of post-punk for that. So it's not really about kind of loving everyone. I think it's sort of about kind of encouraging people to sort of expand and be who they want to be, and to allow for all that heaven can allow. I think part of it is about trying to replace the fear of the unknown with curiosity, is providing people with an opportunity to express themselves and providing opportunity to people with a route to kind of doing that, is that if you can encourage people, they can actually, and they are, incredibly productive and creative. If you're not an optimistic futurist, fuck off. I am an optimistic, and I'm not so much of a futurist, but I'm a militant optimist. I coined the phrase, and I am a militant optimist. And I think it was great, the speaker earlier today. I think in the end, also, I mean, there's no rules with any of this. Through the work which I've done, is we've created, me and my partner Michael have created an enormous amount of value, hundreds of millions of pounds of new investment into places. But I think in the end there's no, cliche time, there's kind of no rules. Just in terms of, as in making a documentary film, there is kind of stock narratives, but in the end you're looking to kind of be bigger than the story itself if you're trying to make a proper film and a good film. And I think the message is that there are no kind of fixed rules, except that my sort of slight god is the creative director of Balenciaga, who has this fantastic phrase, in my mind, which is we have idols but no models to follow. You have to define your own model. And in all of these experiences, and I think in any social entrepreneur who you'll meet, is that they're all defining their own model, they're all sticking their neck out, they're all kind of doing their own thing. And my thing is about trying to find ways in which people can associate, much like this. So thank you.